Captain Jake Morrison sat in the briefing room, staring at the datapad in his hands. The words on the screen made no sense to him. He read them again, slower this time. Emergency Directive 2387. All human military personnel must undergo immediate psychological evaluation by certified interstellar court psychologists. Jake looked up at Colonel Kate Sullivan, who stood at the front of the room. Her face was tight with anger. Behind her, the large screen showed the official seal of the Interstellar Court of Allied Species. "This is a joke, right?" Sergeant Amy Collins asked from the back row. She was Jake's best sniper and had saved his life more times than he could count. "They want to check if we're crazy?" Colonel Sullivan shook her head. "I wish it was a joke, Sergeant." This came down from the highest levels. Every human soldier, sailor, marine, and pilot has to be tested. Lieutenant Ben Hayes raised his hand. He was young, only 22, but he had already flown in 12 combat missions. "Mom, what happens if we fail these tests?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Sullivan replied. "The directive doesn't say, but reading between the lines, I think they might remove us from active duty." The room erupted in angry voices. Jake's soldiers had fought in some of the worst battles in human history. They had bled and died for the Alliance. Now the aliens wanted to test their minds, like they were broken machines. Jake stood up, and the room went quiet. His Iron Wolves battalion respected him completely. He had led them through hell and brought most of them back alive. "What's this really about?" Jake asked. Sullivan pulled up another document on the screen. "The court says they're concerned about our tactical decisions. They claim we show reckless disregard for self-preservation and make suicidal tactical choices." Staff Sergeant Ryan Clark laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Suicidal? We're still alive, aren't we?" "That's exactly the problem," Sullivan said. "We keep winning battles we should lose. We make decisions that should get us killed, but somehow we survive. The aliens can't understand it." Jake thought about the Battle of Kepler 442 3 months ago. His battalion had been surrounded by enemy forces. Any sane commander would have retreated. Instead, Jake had ordered his men to split into smaller groups and attack from all directions. At once, it should have been suicide. Instead, they had won. "So they think we're crazy because we don't give up?" Amy asked. "Apparently," Sullivan replied. "The Centauri representative said our behavior patterns don't match any known psychological profiles. The Vorthic delegation called us tactically irrational, but strategically effective." Commander Alex Turner, captain of the starship U.E.'s Defiant, spoke for the first time. He was older than most of them, with gray hair and scars from decades of fighting. "I've been in space combat for 20 years. I've seen things that would make most aliens run home crying." "Are they saying I'm mentally unstable?" "That's what we're about to find out," Sullivan said. "The first evaluation teams arrive tomorrow. They're bringing their own psychologists." Jake felt anger building in his chest. These were his people. They had volunteered to fight for humanity and the Alliance. They had faced death so many times that it felt like an old friend. Now some alien doctors wanted to poke around in their heads. "Who's conducting these tests?" Jake asked. Sullivan checked her notes. "Dr. Kethvar from the Centauri Medical Institute. He's supposed to be their best psychologist. Also Dr. Zaratok from the Vorthic Science Council. And we're getting our own human observer, Dr. Lisa Parker from Earth Medical." Amy snorted. "At least one of them is human." "Dr. Parker is military," Sullivan added. "She's worked with combat stress before, but she has to follow the court's protocols." Jake looked around the room at his soldiers. These men and women had seen things that would break most people. They had watched friends die. They had made impossible choices. They had survived because they were strong, not because they were crazy. What kind of tests are we talking about? Corporal Nick Thompson asked. He was their communications specialist, a quiet man who had spent 6 months behind enemy lines and somehow made it back alive. Standard psychological evaluation, Sullivan replied, but using interstellar court methods. They want to understand how we think during combat situations. Jake stood up again. Colonel, permission to speak freely? Granted, this is garbage. We fight the way we fight because it works. We take risks because sometimes that's the only option. We don't run away because someone has to hold the line. The room filled with murmurs of agreement. Sullivan nodded. I agree with you, Captain. But this order comes from the very top of the Alliance command structure. We have to comply. What if we refuse? Ryan asked. Then we're court-martialed and kicked out of the service, Sullivan replied. And the Alliance loses its most effective fighting force. Jake sat back down, thinking hard. The Alliance needed human soldiers. Everyone knew it. In every major battle, when things looked hopeless, they called in the humans. When other species retreated, humans advanced. When alien commanders said a mission was impossible, human commanders said it was Tuesday. When do the tests start? Jake asked. Tomorrow morning, 0800 hours. They're setting up in conference room. Amy raised her hand. How long will this take? Each. Evaluation is scheduled for 2 hours. They want to test everyone in the battalion within a week. Jake nodded slowly. He didn't like it, but he understood the situation. If they cooperated, maybe they could show these alien doctors that humans weren't crazy. They were just different. All right, people, Jake said, standing up. We're going to do this thing. We're going to show them that we're not insane. We're just better at this job than anyone else. The soldiers began to file out of the room, talking quietly among themselves. Jake stayed behind to talk to Colonel Sullivan. Kate, what do you really think this is about? He asked when they were alone. Sullivan looked tired. Honestly, I think they're scared of us. We do things that terrify them. We make choices they can't understand, and we keep winning. Jake nodded. So they want to figure out what makes us tick. That's my guess. The question is, what happens when they find out? Dr. Lisa Parker arrived at the base early the next morning. She carried a briefcase full of testing materials and a head full of questions. As a military psychologist, she had worked with combat veterans for years, but she had never been asked. To prove that her own species was sane, the conference room had been transformed overnight. 3 workstations were set up, each with different alien equipment. The smell of ozone filled the air from the Zentari machines. The Vorthic devices hummed. With a low, steady sound, Dr. Kethvar was already there, studying his notes. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and large, dark eyes. His species aged very slowly, and Lisa knew he was over 300 years old. He had probably seen more combat psychology cases than any human doctor alive. Dr. Parker, he said in perfect English, I am pleased to work with you on this study. Lisa shook his hand. His skin felt cold and dry. Thank you, Dr. Kethvar. I have to ask, though, what exactly are we looking for? The alien doctor tilted his head, a gesture she recognized as curiosity. We are trying to understand how human minds function under extreme stress. Your species displays behavior patterns that do not match our models of rational thought. Such as, your soldiers make tactical decisions that should result in death, yet they survive at rates that seem impossible. We need to understand if this is due to psychological abnormalities or some other factor. Dr. Zaratak entered the room. She was shorter than Dr. Kethvar, with blue-tinted skin and 4 arms. Her species was known for their logical thinking and advanced science. She nodded to both doctors. Are we ready to begin? She asked. Lisa checked her watch. It was exactly 0800 hours. Lieutenant Hayes should be here any minute. The door opened, and Ben Hayes walked in. He looked nervous, but determined. Lisa had read his file the night before. 22 years old, fighter pilot, 12 combat missions. He had once flown his damaged ship through an asteroid field to escape 3 enemy fighters. Any sane pilot would have surrendered. "Good morning, Lieutenant," Lisa said. "Please have a seat." Ben sat down in the chair, facing the 3 doctors. The alien equipment began recording everything: his heart rate, brain activity, stress hormones. Lisa made notes on her tablet. "Lieutenant Hayes," Dr. Kethfer began, "we would like you to describe your most recent combat mission." Ben nodded. 2 weeks ago, escort duty. We were protecting a supply convoy when enemy fighters jumped us. 3 of theirs against 2 of ours. What were your thoughts when you realized you were outnumbered? Dr. Zaratok asked. That we were in trouble, Ben replied honestly. But we had a job to do. The convoy was full of medical supplies for the colony on Tau Ceti. Lisa watched the alien doctors exchange glances. Already, Ben's response was different from what they expected. Most species would have focused on their own survival first. "Tell us about your tactical decision," Dr. Kethfer said. "Well, my wingman got hit pretty bad right away. His ship was leaking air, and his weapons were offline. So I told him to get back to the convoy and protect it. That left you alone against 3 enemy fighters," Dr. Zaratok observed. "Yes, ma'am." "And your response was to fly into an asteroid field," Dr. Kethfer said, reading from his notes. Ben looked confused. "That's where the enemy fighters were heading. I had to stop them. But asteroid fields are extremely dangerous," Dr. Zaratok said. "The probability of survival drops to less than 5%. "I didn't really have time to calculate odds," Ben replied. "I just saw that they were trying to get around me to attack the convoy." Lisa made more notes. Ben was describing his thinking process, and it was completely logical from a human perspective. But she could see that the alien doctors were puzzled. "Walk us through what happened in the asteroid field," Dr. Kethfer said. "It was pretty crazy. Rocks everywhere, some of them the size of buildings. The enemy pilots were good, but they were being careful. They didn't want to hit anything." "And you were not being careful?" Dr. Zaratok asked. Ben shrugged. "I figured if I was going to die anyway, I might as well make it count. So I started flying really close to the big asteroids. The enemy pilots couldn't get a clean shot without risking hitting the rocks." "You used the asteroids as cover," Lisa observed. "Sort of, but I also used them as weapons. I got one of the enemy fighters to chase me really close to a big rock. Then I pulled up at the last second. He couldn't turn fast enough and crashed into it." The alien doctors made rapid notes. Dr. Kethfer's equipment was beeping faster now. "What happened to the other 2 fighters?" Dr. Zaratok asked. "They got smarter after that. Started working together to box me in. But I noticed that one of the asteroids was rotating pretty fast. So I flew right at it, then dove under it at the last second." "And the enemy fighters?" "They followed me. But they were flying side by side, and when they dove under the asteroid, they were too close together. Their wings clipped, and they both went down." Dr. Kethfer stared at his readings. "Lieutenant, were you not concerned about your own survival during this encounter?" Ben looked surprised by the question. "Of course I was, but I was more worried about the convoy. Those medical supplies were going to save lives." "So you were willing to die to protect supplies?" Dr. Zaratok asked. "I was willing to die to protect people," Ben corrected. "The supplies were just the means to do that." Lisa saw the alien doctors exchange another look. This was the heart of what they didn't understand. Ben had made a series of decisions that put his life at extreme risk, but he had done it to save others. To him, This was completely rational. Lieutenant, in your opinion, were your actions in the asteroid field logical? Dr. Kethfer asked. Yes, sir. Given the situation, I did what I had to do. Even though you could have retreated and saved your own life? Ben looked genuinely confused. But then the convoy would have been destroyed. Hundreds of people would have died. Dr. Zeratok made more notes. Do you believe your life is worth less than the lives of those people? I believe my job is to protect them. That's what I signed up for. The session continued for another hour. The alien doctors asked about Ben's childhood, his training, his motivations for joining the military. They seemed particularly interested in how he made decisions under pressure. When Ben left, the three doctors sat in silence for several minutes. His psychological profile is completely normal, Dr. Kethfer said finally. By human standards. But by our standards, he should be classified as having severe risk assessment dysfunction. Dr. Zeratok replied. Lisa looked at her colleagues. What if our standards are different because our species are different? What if what looks like dysfunction to you is actually highly functional for us? Dr. Kethfer considered this. You are suggesting that human psychology has evolved specifically for high-risk situations? I'm suggesting that maybe you're looking at this backwards, Lisa said. You think we're crazy because we take risks you wouldn't take. But maybe we take those risks because we're better at surviving them. The next soldier came in before the alien doctors could respond. It was Sergeant Amy Collins, and Lisa knew her story was going to be even more challenging for them to understand than Amy had. Once spent 3 days in a sniper's nest, surrounded by enemy forces, picking off targets one by one while they tried to find her. When she finally ran out of ammunition, she had used rocks and improvised weapons to continue fighting. Lisa watched the alien doctors prepare their questions and wondered what they would make of Amy's perfectly calm explanation of why she had chosen to fight instead of surrender. The evaluations were just beginning, and already Lisa could see that this was going to be more complicated than anyone had expected. By the third day of evaluations, Dr. Kethvar was having trouble sleeping. His centuries of experience in psychology had not prepared him for what he was discovering about human soldiers. Sergeant Amy Collins sat across from him now, completely relaxed. She had just finished describing how she had held a sniper position for 72 hours while surrounded by enemy forces. Any other species would have shown signs of trauma from such an experience. Amy spoke about it like she was discussing the weather. Sergeant Collins, Dr. Kethfer said, you stated that you had opportunities to retreat during this engagement. Why did you remain? Amy shrugged. My job was to provide cover for the evacuation. People were still getting out. Dr. Zeratok leaned forward. But after the first day, you were completely cut off. You had no communication with your forces, and no hope of rescue. I figured someone would come eventually, Amy replied. And even if they didn't, every enemy soldier I kept busy was one less shooting at our people. Dr. Lisa Parker made notes on her tablet. She was starting to see a pattern in all the interviews. Human soldiers consistently put mission success and the safety of others ahead of their own survival. To the alien doctors, this looked like mental illness. To Lisa, it looked like exactly what good soldiers should do. Tell us about the moment you ran out of ammunition, Dr. Kethfer requested. Amy's eyes lit up slightly. That was interesting. I had been counting rounds for 3 days, trying to make every shot count. When I fired my last bullet, I knew I had maybe 10 minutes before they figured out I wasn't shooting anymore. What did you do? I started making noise, banging rocks together, throwing things. I wanted them to think I still had ammo. Dr. Zeratok checked her readings. Amy's heart rate and stress levels remained completely normal, as she described what should have been the most terrifying moment of her life. How long did you maintain this deception? Dr. Kethver asked. About 6 hours. Then they got brave and started moving closer. That's when I had to get creative. Lisa knew what was coming next. She had read Amy's after-action report. The next part of the story would probably give the alien doctors nightmares. I had collected a bunch of rocks over the 3 days, good throwing size, and I had noticed that some of the enemy soldiers were getting careless, thinking I was almost finished. You attacked them with rocks? Dr. Zeratok asked, her voice rising slightly. I picked off the careless ones first. A good rock to the head will drop most species if you throw it hard enough. I got 3 of them before they realized what was happening. Dr. Kethver stared at his equipment. The readings showed that Amy was telling the truth, and more importantly, she felt no distress about any of it. Sergeant, did you not feel fear during this time? He asked. Amy considered the question seriously. Sure, I was scared, but I was also angry. These guys were trying to kill people I cared about. Fear and anger can be useful if you control them right. You controlled your fear? Dr. Zeratok asked. You have to. Fear makes you stupid. Anger makes you careless. I needed to be smart and careful. Lisa watched the alien doctors struggle with this concept. Most species experienced fear as an overwhelming emotion that shut down rational thought. Humans seemed to be able to function normally, even when terrified. What happened when your rescue team arrived? Dr. Kethver asked. Amy smiled for the first time during the interview. Captain Morrison found me throwing rocks at a group of enemy soldiers who were afraid to get close. He said it was the strangest thing he'd ever seen. The session ended, and Amy left the room. Dr. Kethver immediately turned to his colleagues. This is the 15th human soldier I have interviewed, he said. Every single one displays the same pattern. They make tactical decisions that prioritize mission success over personal survival. They function normally under extreme stress. They show no signs of the psychological damage that such experiences should cause. Dr. Zeratok nodded. My readings confirm this. Their brain chemistry during stressful situations is completely different from other species. They produce chemicals that enhance focus and decision-making instead of triggering panic responses. Lisa looked at her notes from all the interviews. What if this isn't a disorder? What if this is just how humans evolved? Explain, Dr. Kethver said. Think about human history. We evolved on a world full of predators. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars. The humans who lived to reproduce were the ones who could stay calm under pressure and make good decisions when everything was going wrong. Dr. Zeratok considered this. You are suggesting that human psychology is specifically adapted for high-stress combat situations? I'm suggesting that what you're seeing isn't mental illness. It's exactly what human soldiers are supposed to be like. The next soldier entered the room. Staff Sergeant Ryan Clark was known throughout the human military for his creative use of explosives. Lisa had heard stories about him that sounded like fiction. Good morning, Sergeant Clark, Dr. Kethver said. We would like to discuss your actions during the siege of Proxima Station. Ryan settled into his chair. He was a big man with steady hands and calm eyes. Which part? It was a long siege. The incident where you used yourself as bait to map. An enemy minefield. Ryan nodded. Yeah, that was tricky. We needed to get supplies to the people trapped in the station, but there was a minefield blocking the only approach route. And your solution was to deliberately trigger the mines? Dr. Zeratok asked. Not all of them. Just enough to figure out the pattern. Most species lay mines in predictable ways. Once you know the pattern, you can find the safe routes. Dr. Kethver leaned forward. But you could have been killed by any one of those explosions. Ryan shrugged. I could get killed crossing the street. The point was to save the people in the station. Walk us through your thought process, Lisa said. Well, I studied the terrain for about an hour. Then I put on the heaviest armor I could find and started walking into the minefield. Every time I triggered a mine, I marked the location and looked for the pattern. How many mines did you trigger? Dr. Zaratok asked. 12. The 13th one almost got me, but by then I had figured out their system. After that, it was just a matter of marking the safe path. The alien doctors exchanged looks again. Dr. Kethfer's equipment was registering readings he had never seen before. Ryan's psychological profile showed someone who was completely rational and mentally healthy, despite describing actions that sounded insane. Sergeant Clark, do you consider your actions in the minefield to be rational? Dr. Kethfer asked. Absolutely. We needed to get through that minefield. I was the best person for the job. I had the most experience with explosives and the best armor. But you could have died, Dr. Zaratok pointed out. So could the 300 people trapped in that station if we didn't get supplies to them. Lisa made more notes. This was the same pattern she had seen in every interview. Human soldiers weighed risks differently than other species. They consistently valued other lives more than their own. The session with Ryan continued for 2 hours. He described other incidents where he had used dangerous tactics to accomplish missions. In every case, his decisions were completely logical from a human military perspective, but appeared suicidal to alien observers. When Ryan left, the 3 doctors sat in silence for a long time. I am beginning to think we are approaching this incorrectly, Dr. Kethfer said finally. What do you mean? Lisa asked. We have been trying to determine if human soldiers are mentally ill. But perhaps the question should be, are they mentally superior? Dr. Zaratok nodded slowly. The data supports this hypothesis. Human soldiers consistently outperform other species in high-stress situations. They make better tactical decisions. Under pressure, they show remarkable psychological resilience. Lisa felt a mix of pride and concern. So you're saying we're not crazy? I am saying, Dr. Kethfer replied, that your species may have evolved the most effective military psychology in the known galaxy, and that terrifies the other species in the Alliance. A week into the evaluations, Dr. Zaratok made a discovery that changed everything. She was reviewing brain scans from the human soldiers when she noticed something unusual. She called Dr. Kethfer and Dr. Parker to her workstation. Look at these neural activity patterns, she said, pointing at the screen. This is from Lieutenant Hayes during combat stress simulation. Dr. Kethfer studied the data. His brain activity is increasing in areas associated with tactical planning and risk assessment. But the fear response centers are not shutting down higher brain functions. Exactly, Dr. Zaratok said. In most species, extreme stress triggers a fight or flight response that reduces complex thinking. But humans seem to think more clearly. Under stress, not less. Dr. Lisa Parker looked at the scans. What does this mean? It means, Dr. Kethfer said slowly, that human brains are wired differently than any other species we have studied. Under conditions that would paralyze other species with fear, humans become more focused and more capable. Dr. Zaratok pulled up more scans. I have similar readings from all 15 soldiers we have tested. Their brains treat extreme danger as a puzzle to be solved rather than a threat to be avoided. The door opened, and Major Chris Powell entered the room. Lisa had been waiting for this interview. Major Powell was an intelligence officer who had access to classified human military doctrines. If anyone could explain how humans really thought about warfare, it was him. Good morning, Major, Dr. Kethfer said. Please have a seat. Major Powell was a thin man with sharp eyes and graying hair. He had been in military intelligence for 15 years and had seen the Alliance's darkest secrets. He sat down and looked at the three doctors calmly. "I understand you have questions about human military psychology," he said. "Major Powell," Dr. Zaratok began, "we have been studying your soldiers for a week now. We are finding psychological patterns that do not match any known species profiles." "What kind of patterns?" "Your soldiers consistently make tactical decisions that prioritize mission success over personal survival. They function normally under extreme stress. They show no signs of the psychological trauma that such experiences should cause." Major Powell nodded. "That sounds about right." Dr. Kethfer leaned forward. "Major, we need to understand if this is normal human behavior, or if your military selects for specific psychological traits." "Both," Powell replied. "We do select for certain traits, but mostly we train people to think the way humans naturally think under pressure. Can you explain this?" Dr. Lisa Parker asked. Powell was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "How much do you know about human military doctrine?" "Very little," Dr. Kethfer admitted. "Human military strategy is classified." "Well, I've been authorized to share some information with you. The truth is, human military doctrine is built around the assumption that conventional tactics will fail." The doctors exchanged glances. This was new information. "What do you mean?" Dr. Zaratok asked. "Every human military plan includes what we call acceptable losses. We assume that some of our people will die. We plan for it, we train for it, and we make sure that when people do die, their deaths accomplish something important." Dr. Kethfer's equipment registered a spike in stress levels from the alien doctors. The concept of planning for deaths was horrifying to most species. "You plan for your soldiers to die?" Dr. Lisa Parker asked. "We plan for the possibility," Powell corrected. "But more than that, we train our soldiers to be effective, even when they know they might not survive the mission." "How is this possible?" Dr. Zaratok asked. Powell leaned back in his chair. "Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Humans evolved in small groups where individual sacrifice for the group's survival was sometimes necessary. A human who could stay calm and make good decisions while facing death was more likely to save the group, even if he died in the process. And this trait was passed on to future generations through the survival of the group," Dr. Kethfer said, understanding dawning in his voice. "Exactly. Humans didn't just evolve to survive individually. We evolved to help our group survive, even at the cost of individual lives." Dr. Zaratok made rapid notes. "This explains the psychological profiles we have been seeing. Your soldiers are not mentally ill. They are displaying optimal group survival behavior." The door opened again, and Private Kelly Martin entered. She was young, only 20, but she had already seen more combat than most alien soldiers would see in a lifetime. "Private Martin," Dr. Kethfer said, "we would like to discuss your recent action on Kepler 442. Kelly sat down. She looked nervous, but determined. "Yes, sir. You were part of a unit that held a defensive position for 72 hours against overwhelming odds. Can you tell us about that?" "It wasn't supposed to be 72 hours, Kelly said. "We were supposed to hold for 12 hours until reinforcements arrived. But the reinforcements got delayed." "What were your thoughts when you realized help was not coming?" Dr. Zaratok asked. Kelly shrugged. "That we had to keep fighting. There were civilians behind us. If we let the enemy through, they would all die." Major Powell watched the young soldier with interest. Kelly was a perfect example of what he had been describing. She had faced certain death and continued to function normally. "Private, at what point did you realize you might not survive?" Dr. Kethfer asked. "Pretty early on. We were outnumbered about 10 to 1. Most of us figured we weren't going home." "And how did that make you feel?" Kelly thought about it. Scared. Sad, but also determined. We had a job to do. Dr. Lisa Parker leaned forward. Kelly, can you walk us through your thinking during the worst part of the battle? The second day was the hardest. We had lost half our people, and the enemy kept coming. I remember thinking that I might die, but I also thought about my little brother back home. He's only 12. I wanted him to grow up in a world where people like us stood up to protect people like him. The alien doctors stared at their equipment. Kelly's readings showed normal stress levels, but her psychological profile was completely stable. She was describing the worst experience of her life with the same calm tone she might use to describe a training exercise. Private Martin, Dr. Kethfer said, in your opinion, were the actions of your unit rational? Yes, sir. We did what we had to do. Even though most of your unit died? Kelly's expression grew serious. Especially because most of my unit died. They died for something important. That matters. When Kelly left, the room was silent for a long time. I believe I understand now, Dr. Kethfer said finally. Human military psychology is not about individual survival. It is about group survival through individual sacrifice. Major Powell nodded. That's the core of it. We fight differently because we think differently. When other species see impossible odds, they retreat. When humans see impossible odds, we ask what we can accomplish before we die. Dr. Zaratok looked at her data. This explains everything. The tactical decisions that seem suicidal to us are actually highly rational from a group survival perspective. There's something else, Major Powell said. Something I think you need to understand before you write your report. What is that? Dr. Lisa Parker asked. The reason the Alliance calls us when situations look hopeless. We don't just fight differently. We win differently. We win by being willing to lose. Dr. Kethfer considered this. You mean that your willingness to accept death gives you tactical advantages? It gives us options other species don't have. When you're not afraid to die, you can take risks that others can't. You can make sacrifices that others won't. And sometimes, that's the difference between victory and defeat. The alien doctors spent the rest of the day reviewing their data with this new understanding. Everything they had seen made sense now. Human soldiers weren't mentally ill. They were the product of millions of years of evolution that had created the most effective warriors in the galaxy. 3 weeks after the evaluations began, the Interstellar Court of Allied Species convened to hear the results. The great hall was filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. At the center of the room sat Judge Executor Vexthul, the Ancient. Leader of the court, Dr. Kethfer, Dr. Zaratok, and Dr. Lisa Parker stood at the witness table. Behind them sat the human soldiers who had been evaluated, including Captain Jake Morrison and his Iron Walls Battalion. Ambassador Rachel Stone represented humanity in the proceedings. She was a former military officer herself and understood what was at stake. If the court ruled that humans were mentally unfit for military service, it could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Dr. Kethfer, Judge Executor Vexthul said in his deep, rumbling voice, present your findings. The Zentari psychologist stood up. His report was displayed on screens throughout the hall. Honored Judge, we have completed psychological evaluations of 50 human military personnel. Our findings are ... unexpected. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. Many had expected the humans to be declared mentally unstable. We began this study believing that human soldiers displayed signs of psychological dysfunction. Dr. Kethvar continued. Their tactical decisions seemed reckless. Their willingness to accept casualties appeared irrational. Their behavior under extreme stress did not match any known psychological profiles. Judge Executor Vexthul leaned forward. And what did you discover? We discovered that we were wrong about everything. The hall erupted in surprised voices. Judge Vexthal called for order. Dr. Zaratok stood up next. Our neurological studies reveal that human brains are uniquely adapted for high-stress combat situations. Where other species experience decreased cognitive function under extreme pressure, humans actually become more focused and more capable. She activated a holographic display showing brain scans. These images show human neural activity during simulated combat stress. Notice how the areas responsible for tactical planning and risk assessment become more active, not less. A. Zentari. Delegate raised a tentacle. Are you saying that humans are mentally superior to other species? We are saying, Dr. Kethfer replied, that human psychology has evolved specifically for warfare in ways that other species have not. Dr. Lisa Parker stood up. If I may add to my colleagues' findings, what we discovered is that human military behavior is not based on individual psychology, but on group survival instincts. Human soldiers are willing to die, not because they don't value their own lives, but because they value other lives more. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the audience as the doctors explained their findings. He had spent weeks being poked and prodded by alien psychologists. Now he was learning that they had concluded he and his soldiers were not crazy after all. Ambassador Rachel Stone stood up. Your Honor, if the court please, I would like to present additional evidence. Judge Vexthal nodded. Proceed, Ambassador. Over the past 50 years, human forces have participated in over 200 major military engagements as part of the Alliance. In situations where other Allied forces retreated or were defeated, human forces achieved victory in 78% of cases. She displayed a chart showing battle statistics. More importantly, in every case where human forces were present, civilian casualties were significantly lower than in battles fought without human participation. A Vorthic delegate spoke up. Ambassador Stone, these statistics support the argument that human tactics are effective, but they do not address the concern that these tactics are psychologically unhealthy. General Marcus Webb stood up from the human delegation. He was the highest-ranking human military officer, a man who had been fighting for the Alliance longer than most delegates had been alive. Your Honor, may I address the court? Judge Vexthal gestured for him to proceed. I've been a soldier for 30 years, General Webb said. I've fought alongside troops from every species in this alliance. And I can tell you something that these studies might not show in their data. The hall grew quiet. Human soldiers don't fight the way we do because we're crazy. We fight this way because someone has to. When the Zephyrian colonies were under attack 5 years ago, who did you call? When the Arcturus system was invaded, who held the line until reinforcements arrived? When the Vega Rebellion threatened to spread across 3 sectors, who ended it? General Webb looked around the hall. You called us. Every time the situation looked hopeless, every time other forces weren't enough, you called the humans. And we came, and we bled, and we died, and we won. But General, a Zentari delegate said, the question is whether this behavior is sustainable. Are human soldiers damaging their mental health by fighting this way? Dr. Kethfer stood up again. If I may respond to that concern, our evaluations included extensive psychological testing for trauma, stress disorders, and other mental health issues. What we found was remarkable. He displayed another chart. Human combat veterans show lower rates of long-term psychological damage than veterans from any other species. They recover from traumatic experiences faster. They maintain better unit cohesion under stress. By every measure we can apply, human military psychology is not just effective, it is remarkably healthy. Judge Executor Vexthal was quiet for a long moment. Dr. Kethfor, what is your professional recommendation regarding human military personnel? The Zentari doctor took a deep breath. Your Honor, It is my professional opinion that human soldiers should not be removed from military service. In fact, I believe other allied species could benefit from learning human tactical and psychological approaches to warfare. The hall erupted in surprised voices again. This was the opposite of what most delegates had expected. Dr. Zaratok nodded in agreement. I concur with Dr. Kethfer's assessment. Human military psychology represents the most advanced warrior mentality we have encountered. Rather than being a problem to be solved, it should be studied and, where possible, emulated. Judge Vexthul called for order again. The court will now deliberate. The judges withdrew to consider their verdict. Captain Morrison and his soldiers waited nervously. Their entire future hung in the balance. After 2 hours, the judges returned. Judge Executor Vexthul stood up to deliver the verdict. The Interstellar Court of Allied Species has reached a decision regarding Emergency Directive 2387. The hall fell silent. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that human military personnel do not suffer from psychological dysfunction. Rather, they possess psychological capabilities that are uniquely suited to military service. Relief washed over the human delegation. However, Judge Vexthul continued, the court recognizes that human military effectiveness creates both opportunities and responsibilities for the Alliance. He activated a new display. Therefore, the court issues the following new directive. All allied species military academies will implement human-developed training programs focused on tactical decision-making under extreme stress and unit cohesion. Protocols. Captain Morrison felt his jaw drop. They weren't being kicked out of the military. They were being asked to teach other species how to fight like humans. Additionally, Judge Vexthul said, human military advisors will be assigned to all major allied military operations to provide expertise in high-risk tactical situations. Ambassador Stone stood up. Your Honor, humanity accepts these responsibilities. As the court session ended, Captain Morrison gathered his soldiers together. Sergeant Amy Collins shook her head in amazement. So let me get this straight, she said. They thought we were crazy, but it turns out we're just really good at our jobs? Lieutenant Ben Hayes laughed. Better than that. Now they want us to teach them how to be crazy like us. Staff Sergeant Ryan Clark grinned. This should be interesting. Wait until they try to learn how to think like humans under pressure. Captain. Morrison looked at his people. They had been through hell together, and they had come out stronger. Now they were being asked to share that strength with the entire galaxy. All right, people, he said. Looks like we've got a new mission. We're going to teach the galaxy how to fight like humans. And how to win like humans, Amy added. Same thing, Morrison replied with a smile. As they walked out of the court hall, Dr. Kethfer approached Captain Morrison. Captain, the alien doctor said, I want to apologize for doubting you and your soldiers. Morrison shook his head. No apology necessary, Doc. You are just doing your job. I learned something important during these evaluations, Dr. Kethfer said. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to do what is right despite fear. Now you're thinking like a human, Morrison replied. Dr. Kethfer tilted his head in that gesture. Morrison had learned meant curiosity. Is that a good thing? Morrison looked at his soldiers, who were already making jokes about their new teaching duties. Doc, it's the best thing in the galaxy. 3 months later, the first class of alien cadets began training under human instructors. The program was called Advanced Tactical Psychology, but everyone knew what it really was. A course in how to be brave when everything was going wrong. Captain Morrison stood in front of his first class of Zentari and Vorthic students. They looked nervous, which was understandable. They were about to learn how to think like the craziest species in the galaxy. All right, people, Morrison said. using the term he applied to all sin.